6-game win streak for your Miami Marlins. This is the hottest team in baseball right now. Time to look at what it means for the NL East battle. Are the Marlins seriously in the hunt for the division? We're all looking at the wildcard spots, but what about the division? Are they in the mix? We're also going to talk about the hottest hitter in the game in Jesus Sanchez and potentially how this Marlins team could be upgraded as we approach the deadline. We've been talking about catcher. There's one obvious name out there in Sal Perez. Dig into that. Also looking ahead, previewing a 3-game series on the road to keep this win streak rolling in Chicago against the White Sox. All on today's Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins. This, of course, is your daily Marlins podcast. I'm your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up on Twitter, of course, at Miami Marlins _UK. If you're listening to the pod, hit subscribe. This is your team every day. And thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. It's a UK-friendly recording slot. Delighted to welcome in the house, Chase, the Loud Marlins fan, is here. Happy Friday, brother. How are we feeling?
Happy Friday. Only a couple hours left of work on the east side. You're on Friday holiday already. Let's get this talk going, drinking that great beer over there.
You know it, brother. You know it. Forgot to mention there is a YouTube channel as well. For those watching, you'll see Loud Marlins fans here, and you'll see the graphics as well. These graphics packages have been updated, upgraded, and they are looking sexy as well. Chase, back-to-back sweeps, brother. The Marlins, 2 series in a row, 2 sweeps. I don't care what teams they were playing. It's sweeping ain't easy, as we said after that A's series, but they get it done against the Royals too. In what? I mean, game 1 was back and forth, but game 2 and 3 in that series, it was a resounding dubs for the Marlins. So how impressive is it that the fact that they've got teams in front of them that they should beat, and they did. Not only did they just beat them, they swept them. So impressive, right?
Lone Depot Park is sparkling clean right now after the cleaning that we just gave the 2 teams that visited. It's something that the South Florida baseball fan hasn't seen in many years, where we beat up on the teams we're supposed to beat up on as we're rated better or have a better record than. This series proved that this team has grown from the previous years and that what we can expect under Skip Schumacher. And the way they won some of those games wasn't, let's say, blowouts. Yes, versus the Royals, the last 2 games were easier than the first one. But even in that first game that was on FS1 and the Sunday game against the Athletics, the Marlins had to come back. The way they won some of those games is how teams should be able to come back, and our bats lit up behind some guys we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the encouraging thing, right? They actually went, back-to-back days where they were down by 4 runs and found a way to come back and win. And so that's one way of winning games. In some ways, that isn't overly sustainable, going 4 runs down and then having to kind of claw your way back day after day. But those other games around it, actually, the Marlins pretty much dominated those games and kind of managed them pretty well. And so I think that's the most impressive thing. What's the one or couple of things that stick out to you, mate? The most, I guess, impressive element of this 6-game win streak thus far, if there's anything that's front and center of your mind.
It's the hitting from the lower half of the lineup. The 6, 7, and 8, 7, 8, 9 guys are really heating up. Even like Joey Wendell had heat up. Stallings had a couple hits there. Nick Fortes, I think he got a home run in one of the 2 games he played. It's the lower half of the lineup that's now moving up. Of course, the Jonathan Davis may have struggled in his game, the Garrett Hampsons of the world, but they're making plays, whether it's deep drives to drive an RBI in, or if they're walking, they're scoring. And that is really just impressive to me.
It'd be unfair as well to not mention one of the most talked about guys in baseball right now. The national eyeballs are now on Luis Arraez because he's hitting over 400 into June. This is insane. Luis Arraez, mate. I mean, we've talked about him plenty already in the episodes we've done together, but he just keeps getting better and better, to be honest with you, mate. I've never seen anything like this. In the modern day, there's been nothing like this for years, has there?
No, and, I was on a national show on a network that I've joined on Tuesday night this week, and they have guys who have been covering the game for over 40 years on that show that I'm speaking with, so I'm learning a lot. And what they were most impressed of was that they were talking about how last year they called what he was doing or how he won the AL batting title pedestrian. What was it, 314 or something like that? Mm-hmm. And for what he's doing now, they even said there's been no one since Ted Williams to really control the game like Luis Arraez is. And you can't get him out for the most part. Yeah, he'll ground out into a double play here and there, but, he's hitting it. It's just, you and I have discussed it. No matter where you put him, he's changing his form and really just doing something we've never seen.
Really, it's so true, mate. And the funny thing is, right, where I think you've obviously got that battle with Ronald Acuna maybe for the MVP. We'll see how it all plays out. We're only, a third of the way into the year, so there's plenty of baseball to go. But Acuna's numbers, what he's doing, he's got the power, but he's obviously the speed is back. But I would say the changes in the game have really significantly opened up the running game. But then you then get people go, well, hey, Arraez must be benefiting from the changes of the shift. But that absolutely isn't the case. He was never shifted because he can hit it anywhere. So you were never shifting Arraez anyway. So Arraez is seeing little to no benefit, whereas the guys that lean on the running game, other than John Birdie, I have no idea why Birdie's running game has gone so drastically backwards. But in general, everything's set up for the guys to be stealing bags. And so you'd expect a big surge in speed and stolen base numbers. But what Arraez is doing, even in the modern game and with some of these changes, is just so much more impressive, I think. Okay, it's great to pad your numbers with loads of stolen bags and great if Acuna gets 70 stolen bases. Amazing. But some of that is a product of the rule changes that have come into place, in my opinion. What about you?
Isn't that what makes this more impressive than what Acuna is doing? Is he's doing without those additional numbers, right? He's the MVP of this team because he's driving in runs no matter where you place him in the lineup. He's getting on base for the Jorge Solers and the Jesus Sanchez's, the De La Cruzes of the world to hit those home runs, and they're not standalone home runs anymore. They're multiple run home runs, right? And you mentioned the shift. It's not like he's hitting everything on the ground where it's sneaking through. He's hitting over these outfielders or infielders' heads. Yeah. The outfield's moving in. He's driving the ball past them. If the infield's moving out, he's dropping some bloops to the opposite end of the field. It's crazy.
It really is. We're going to talk about Jesus Sanchez after in segment 2. But just thinking about heading into the year, about Jesus Sanchez, and he might be a guy that would benefit from some of these shift changes. But actually, his approach has completely changed. So we'll dig into that after, because Jesus Sanchez, another opposite field home run. This is insane. Insane. Let's just kind of finish up. We're talking about the Acuna. We're talking about the Braves. The Braves and Mets have just finished a series. The Mets seem like they're in dire straits already. We're not even into July, and the Mets look like they're already cooked. Pete Alonso onto the IL today. As we sit here right now, mate, the Marlins are 3.5 back in the division. They're second in the division, 3.5 games back on a 6-game winning streak, 8-2 in their last 10. The Braves equally have kind of caught fire a touch as well after a bit of a sticky period themselves. They've won 5 on the spin. But I know we're all looking at the wildcard spots, but I wonder if we should be looking at this as maybe a divisional race maybe that could actually heat up. I don't know. Is that a little bit too optimistic?
It's not. You play the Braves 6 more times, and if you're within firing distance, you can take up some of those games, and then maybe one or two games out against them when we play them. So it could go back and forth. Realistically, I'm happy with the wild card spot because historically, when the Miami Marlins, the Florida Marlins franchise, when they get into the playoffs as a wild card, when the Braves win the division in a full season, not a partial season, we don't lose in the playoffs. And really, we have this pitching that is scary. And we may not get into that on this show, but when that rotation and those starting five are hot, they're not going to be beatable in a series of 3, 5, or 7 games.
Yeah, and not only the starters, mate, but the bullpen, if it continues as it has.
It was so much fun to watch the Braves win yesterday against the Mets. I just want to throw some fire out there. You know, the Braves fans are cocky, but they have a reason to be. Mets fans, they just talk a lot of garbage, like they're the best team in the world, and they just got blown out by or a division rival again, just like late last season versus the Braves in Atlanta. And it's just a lot of fun to watch.
It really is. It is. I love these interdivision actions, particularly that Braves Mets rivalry is really spiced up last year because obviously the Mets, you know, they were the division kings. They were already claimed the division in June or July, and next thing is, I mean, it was one hell of a race, and the Braves ended up pipping them to the post. So yeah, that kind of hangover remains there. The Phillies quietly going about their business as well at the moment. Like they've had a weird year. The Phillies, they go hot and cold, like, you know, it's crazy, and they're on a bit of a winning run right now as well. So you can't discount the Phils, but you know the division remains tricky. But overall, less games against the division. We're all seeing it now, right? The Marlins and Phillies go outside of their division for games. Next thing is they go on big, long winning streaks. Like, that's the thing, right? Like, the division has always been tough and made it so tough for the Marlins to, you know, compete in the division, but also the wild card because their competition was so much stronger than maybe some of the other teams. We see in the AL Central, where obviously the Sox sit, there's not one team over 500. They're all below 500 this year, which is crazy. But anyway, let's talk about our good friends over at Gametime. And then I really want to dig into Jesus Sanchez and also maybe talking about some AL Central guys in Sal Perez and also talking about the White Sox. So we'll do that. Get the graphics pumped for Gametime. And buying tickets to your favorite events, it should not be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. And it is Friday, guys. So, you know, it's time to get out there. And with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. You can forget planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets, football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Is there any more? There is more. Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Can't say fairer than that. So what have you got to do? Pretty simple. You got to download the Gametime app. It starts there. So download the Gametime app. You create an account and you use the code. This is all in caps. Locked on MLB. That gets you $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code Locked on MLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Let's go. All right then, brother. For me, Jesus Sanchez. I didn't see this coming. To be frank, I did not see this coming at the start of the year. But Jesus Sanchez and Brant Brown have somehow found a way, and maybe some Luis Arraez influence sprinkled in there. But Jesus Sanchez has found it, mate, and he looks a legit dude again all of a sudden. I've no idea what's changed for him. He was asked that recently, and I think I'm not going to share it with you. Like, he wanted to keep the secret sauce to himself, but how much of a boost has he been for this Marlins lineup, mate?
It's 100% better than I think any of us thought he'd be.
Yep.
In fact, I'm at fault for it. I'm a part of those who tweeted against him. At the beginning of this season, you know, you had the 4 outfielders. You wanted DLC to start. You have Avisail Garcia struggling. Jesus Sanchez was struggling just as bad, striking out. And he didn't change his stance and he didn't change his batting style for any different situation, whether it was bases loaded or no men on. He didn't change his stance, and it was annoying. It was frustrating, and I even compared him to the trash can Leon. So I'm sorry. Apologize if you're listening, Jesus Sanchez. I am sorry. I will never go against you like that again, and I'm so proud of what you're doing and how you're doing it. So whatever you're doing, keep doing.
There we go. It was great to hear. It was on the Wednesday game. was the Wired Wednesdays, I think it's called, on the Bally broadcast. And they cycled around loads of guys. It was great to hear, actually. Sitting there listening to Brant Brown, it's one of the first times I've really heard him speak in any depth. And I was just sitting there like, wow, this is, he's clearly funneling so much information to the guys. And I think Skip's kind of called it out to say early on in the year, a few of the guys were struggling to kind of get to grips with what was available to them and struggling to make sense of that. But now it feels like it's starting to click into place. And this is just a polar opposite from what we've seen as Marlins fans the last few years, where you see the talent, there's talent there, but they struggle to make adjustments at the big league level. What we're seeing for one of the first times in many, many years are players actively making adjustments and delivering at the plate. It's so refreshing, right? And so necessary. But this is what the Marlins need to be able to do, is find ways to unlock the potential to benefit from all these moves they've made over the years.
It's like a change in the season, a change in weather. Something just changed. It's really, you got to give credit to this coaching staff and the staff that was assembled under Skip Schumacher. You know how I felt about the previous manager and his team. I'm amazed at what a change of staff can do in such little time. Whether it's changing positions, you see a third baseman out of Gene Segura here and there when he's swiping at those hot corner balls. You see Jazz Chisholm was getting better and better and better in center field. Even, he's always going to put effort. But that goes to, I think, John Jay in the outfield. Now you have Brent Brown as your hitting coach, and he's helping these players make adjustments. I mean, look at DLC. He's on fire. Joey Wendell had a decent series after really being under the Mendoza line for most of the season. And Jesus Sanchez is benefiting the most from it. Whatever they're doing, keep doing. And, we're right behind you, batting, hoping you bat in that 4th or 5th spot and get some RBIs and runs in.
There you go. I'm with you. One other guy that has been missing from the outfield mix. So the Marlins have obviously been on this run. It's been without Jazz Chisholm Jr., the starting center fielder, the catalyst for a lot of the run production outside of Luis Arraez. And, he's been missing. He was originally, we were kind of circling this date, 9th of June, 6-9. We were circling the 6-9 and saying, this could be when Jazz is going to make the return. I don't believe that we're quite at that stage where it's going to happen today. I mean, obviously, I haven't seen the lineups announced, but, Jazz has only recently, I think, come out of the boot and still working on some baseball activities. So, it's going to be a little bit longer process here for Jazz than maybe we expected. But let's say, maybe by the time they're back from the road trip, perhaps, that could be when we're looking for Jazz to be injected into this, back onto the roster anyway. Which again will just give them another huge boost here with Jazz. And we're all sitting here last year, we'd have been thinking, boy, oh boy, we just can't get Jazz back quick enough. We're sunk without him. Right now, they're finding ways to win without Jazz. And for me, that's one of the most impressive things thus far this year. What about you?
It's impressive that they're finding ways to win and other guys are stepping up. We didn't have Luis Arraez last year keeping us afloat. Jorge Soler was out just as even maybe longer than Jazz. I forget who got injured first, but he had the back problems. He's pretty much been on fire, a little cool down the last couple games. But Jorge Soler, you have Garrett Cooper. He's always coming in clutch. That's Garrett Cooper. And you talked about Jazz not being on the field, but he's still off the field. And I think his presence in that dugout really fires the guys up still. You still have your heartbeat. It may not be on the field, but he's definitely pumping up the guys in the dugout, keeping the spirits optimistic, even when they go down. So there's so much part of the game we don't see on camera that he's doing and being a leader on this team.
It's a great point. There's another guy that's been on the bench there recently too, not active, but on the bench. I'm not sure if he is the heartbeat of this clubhouse, probably not. But Avisail Garcia has also been around the clubhouse. Sounds like his AAA rehab has been cut short, maybe a recurrence of the issue he was experiencing. It's been a bit murky around Avisail Garcia, and so I do want to talk about him after the next ad and talk about, a potential future move there that the Marlins could make. And I think we obviously saw Sal Perez up close and personal over the week. Craig Mish has spoken to him as well. We're looking forward to that article in the Herald dropping soon, because fundamentally, Sal Perez with his 10-5 trade rights means that he can veto any trade. So the choice is his. Even if the Royals strike a deal, it still comes down to him, and he has the right to veto anything there. And Craig said he's spoken to him. He's going to share the details on that. But I think for right now, let's play hypothetical that Sal Perez, A, is available and B, is happy to be moved. And what something could look like for the Marlins here. So we'll dig into that. Before we do that, though, it's our good friends over at Birddogs, and those graphics I'll back up again, guys, for certain. And for those from a Birddogs perspective, I hope you've all been and checked them out thus far, but they are there to make you guys look and feel good. Stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look, baby. They do the exact same thing as the Lululemon, but fit way better. They fit better than regular shorts, and are made of a stiff, restricting cotton. Sounds amazing, right? Sounds absolutely amazing. What you have to do is pretty simple. You get over to birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB. You enter this promo code, and it's all in caps and all one word, Locked On MLB. And when you make the purchase, you get a free Yeti-style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB for that free Yeti-style tumbler. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you that. Okay. So, yeah.
Gotta love those stiff cotton shorts.
You do, brother.
Love it.
You certainly do. Let's talk about Sal Perez, mate, because I think if the Marlins look to upgrade in year at the catching position, Sal Perez, for me, is the most obvious candidate, taking away the fact that he can veto any trade. But the Royals clearly not in the hunt this year. Obviously, he is having a good year with the stick, aging behind the dish, perhaps. But, you know, firstly, before we get into maybe the trade situation and the package or whatever, but how would you feel about a Sal Perez move? Like, how well do you think he fits maybe the need at catcher at this point? Do the Marlins even need Sal Perez?
We need a bat at catcher. So if he's going to add on to some runs being scored or stop hitting in these double plays that Stallings has been really doing lately, and these ground outs, sure, bring him on in. I like Sal Perez. I've liked him his whole career. He really was the guy behind that team going to and winning a World Series. You've got to respect him for that. Yes, I want him on this team. But there's some question marks that comes with a catcher mid-season. It's building the relationship with the catchers, or the pitchers, I should say. It's, you know, he's producing at the plate, but you mentioned he's not the same guy he used to be. But any addition is good, I guess, if you're subtracting, let's say, a Stallings from your team. I like Nick Fortes. I think Nick, if he plays every day, give him the time and chance, he will grow, and he has. I mean, he hit a home run last week. So I think that the Marlins will benefit by acquiring Perez. I don't know how much of a difference it would make, being the other time and obstacles in place to get him adjusted to the new team.
Yeah, so I think the point you make there around the relationship with the pitchers, making sure that you know is, you know, we can get up to speed quickly and make sure there's no drop off or impact to the pitchers. But you know, listen, Sal Perez is you know, an absolute stud. You know, he's a 33 WAR career. I mean, like he's a stud. Like, I mean, he can adjust quickly. I'm confident of that. And you're right. It's an offensive upgrade, right? They got to look at it as, do we want to look to upgrade this spot? And who knows? Like, Nick Fortes has really started to heat up, and you know, maybe the Marlins just think, actually, do you know what? We think we're good, like leading primarily with Fortes with the stick, and Stallings becomes a little bit more of a defensive kind of backup catcher type guy. Who knows? But what I would say on Sal Perez, the main thing that sticks out is, like, he's owed a ton of dough, and you know, there's 42 million owed over the next 2 seasons after this one. He's on 20 million this year. Plus there's a club option in 2026 when he turns 36. It's got a 2 million buyout on that. So if the Marlins were to trade for Perez, there's 44 million guaranteed in future years, plus whatever's remaining on his 20 million this year. So
let's just for round numbers say this is a 50 million committal that the Marlins would have to Sal Perez as he kind of ages gracefully, hopefully, but perhaps not. I think when you look at those numbers, mate, 20 million for the Marlins to be paying anyone, it feels too steep. It feels too much and too rich if you look at it in that perspective. However, where my head is at with this one is clearly the Arraez Garcia situation has not righted itself. Arraez Garcia is owed 12 million for the next 2 after this, plus there's a club option as well. So I truly believe if the Marlins were to make this move, the only way they could make it would be if Arraez Garcia went the other way. And so they send Avi. That, it's not a needle mover in terms of, they're not going to value his production, but the Marlins have to find a way to balance the money, and you end up having a net, I guess, result there of having to pay $8 million a year, $10 million a year to Sal Perez. And that number feels okay. That feels palatable for me to pay, be paying a net result there, Sal Perez 8 to 10. So on the money side, I feel like that kind of makes sense. What about you?
You can make it work money-wise, yes. And
yeah.
The big question is, what do you lose not having Arraez in the dugout or the clubhouse? One thing also that you don't see on camera is every player that comes off the field after an at-bat, Arraez goes and talks to them. They're not showing this on camera that often, but he's giving them advice and helping them out. So what does he mean to the clubhouse right now? That's a question mark we don't know the answers to. Maybe some of our friends who ask those questions could ask some players that. Money-wise, you can make it work. This cheap ownership, which cheap is working, this cheap ownership has been reluctant to take on older players and old money.
Yep.
How much would the Royals pay? And the biggest question mark here, and here it is, big question mark, what do you have to pair? Let's say it is Arraez Garcia. What are you pairing up with him for the Royals to take on his contract on the back end? So what pitchers are we giving up there? Is it going to be an eater who just came off the IL and I think is in a rehab start from what I'm seeing? Is it, are you pairing one of your starters like a Trevor Rogers? Everybody but Yuri, I must say, is available, right? Sandy, Yuri, Luzardo. Is it going to be Eddie Cabrera? What are you pairing with Arraez Garcia that would entice the Royals to send them to your way?
Yeah, I think that's the question. I think the Royals clearly at this point, like they seem a way off at this point. They've had a real issue in that organization around developing pitchers. Like that's just been their main issue. And thus maybe they turn to the Marlins and their pitching development, which has been so impressive over the years, and look to scoop up, who's to say like a Max Meyer, for example, couldn't be the type of guy they're interested in. Really like limited or almost zero service time, but pretty much ready to rock and roll. I do wonder where they sit on that. And so the fit's interesting. I'm not completely sold on it because I don't think the money matches. And also fundamentally, it may just be that the Royals are just never going to move on from Sal Perez, and he never wants to move on either. And thus this is all a moot point. But I do think, like, you start to kind of think in your mind, what could a Marlins deal look like? They can't afford $20 million a year, but they could certainly offset that by sending Arraez Garcia's 12, and they end up having an $8 million net boost in their budget anyway, which I think is palatable. They have the ammo to do it. They have the ammo to do most deals, particularly for an aging catcher that, it's the value is up in the eye of the beholder is how I would describe it. Let's finish up here, brother. Talk some White Sox. There's a 3-game series going on here, mate. To me, the White Sox, whilst they've had a slow start, there look to be some issues where, clubhouse may be related, but, overall, like, I don't think you can discard the White Sox here. I think this could be a really interesting test for the Marlins. What about you?
I agree. Any road trip is a test on its own. You have a 9-game roadie starting in Chicago on the south side. They just lost one of yesterday's games, but before that, they were a pretty hot team for the White Sox. They were climbing their way back into contention in the division that everybody, I think you mentioned, is under 500. So they're right there. I mean, they're 3.5 games out of the Central. They're not just giving up at this point. They're going to continue. I think that Marlins can win 2 of 3. They have a good pitching staff. Cease is a great pitcher. I think we're facing him tonight. So it's a nice start. Is it him versus Yuri tonight? Is that that's going to be a futures matchup, right? Two young guys. Yuri coming off a couple of wins at home and away. So it's going to be an interesting series. Let's see if Tim Anderson is going to be auditioning to come to Miami, because you mentioned trades. You may discuss this on another show, but maybe after the series we discuss where Tim Anderson and what we're giving up to get him out to Miami, because that's really the move. We need a shortstop badly. Although Jacob Amaya is heating up in the minors. Another thing to discuss on another show. I'm sorry.
It really is.
The White Sox. Sorry. The White Sox is a test. I think we could win 2 of 3, but you never know. And you hope for the best and to continue this hot streak that we're in on our own.
Yeah, I do think it's coincidental that, 2 of the names that most clubs will be thinking about, particularly the Marlins will be thinking about because of potentially their needs, which do potentially sit at catcher, also at shortstop. You get in back-to-back series, you get Sal Perez, and then you also get some eyeballs on Tim Anderson. And so that will be a storyline here to see what Tim Anderson's looking like. I did see someone post some numbers from his return in June, I think it was, of last year. So he went down hurt early, I think with a hamstring or some sort of issue. And his numbers since then to today, and the numbers don't actually look that impressive, to be honest with you. So I'm interested. I haven't seen any Tim Anderson this year. I'm looking forward to getting my eyeballs on him. And you're right, the pitcher matchups do look juicy. Yuri Perez going in game 1 against Dylan Cease. Sandy Alcantara, as we know, always follows Yuri Perez now. He's going against Michael Kopech. And then you got Braxy Garrett going against Lucas Giolito. So, yeah, it's going to be a tough test there for the Marlins hitting, which has been hot. And it's been hot, likely driven by the fact that the pitchers they've been facing have been below average, let's say. So let's see how this club can do against maybe a team that isn't doing well, but does have some pitching that can maybe shackle the hitting. We're running long. However, there is some breaking news that's happened while we've been on. So I think it's right to ask you, and it's breaking news that I think you'll be interested in. It doesn't pertain directly to the Marlins, but a former Marlin, and Anthony Bass, has been DFA'd by the Blue Jays around about 30 minutes ago. So just spotted that on Twitter then as I was scrolling through. Chase, I know, a fan of the Bass man. How surprised are you with that news, or an initial reaction to that news of Bass being DFA'd there?
You just shocked me. Anthony's a friend of mine. We don't always share the same beliefs in a lot of areas, but I don't lose friendships over beliefs of any type. Everyone's their own person. I think I had seen that the Blue Jays were throwing him to catch the ceremonial first pitch tonight. I think it was the Pride night. They were kind of throwing him into doing something he may or may not want to be showcased doing, again, to his own beliefs. I can't speak for him. That's shocking. They gave up Jordan Groshans to get him. That's not just that's a good prospect you give up to get the guy. Anthony Bass, other than some media issues, some bringing bad attention to that team in the last week or so, he's still got a lot left in his tank. And to any team that gives him the opportunity to perform, he always does his best. So I wish Anthony the best. I'm not going to say anything negative on this topic either way. I wish him the best. And, that bullpen built on former Marlins wasn't performing that well from what I see in their standings. So maybe they get to make a move to bring someone else up who deserves the chance.
Yeah, interesting move from the Blue Jays, and felt like that relationship was obviously a little bit strained. It's been a bit of an interesting year for the Bass man in general. Had a couple of PR faux pas along the way, but it is what it is. I'm sure he'll be scooped up somewhere because boy, oh boy, he was so effective last year in that seventh inning extravaganza. And like you said, the Marlins managed to move him his final year of his deal and get Jordan Groshans in the house as well. Obviously, Zach Pop part of that deal as well. But that's going to wrap us up for this one. It's been a very fun episode. I appreciate Chase for hopping on. Guys, if you are looking to follow the game this evening, the Marlins, of course, are playing the White Sox 8:10 Eastern. You can catch every pitch of the Marlins broadcast with via Sirius XM on the SXM app. Just search Marlins, and hopefully it will be them calling their 7th win in a row. Looking forward to this one. Big weekend of baseball for the Marlins. Can they keep this win streak rolling? Can they keep the pressure on the Braves? We're going to find out. It should be a good one. Let's go Fish.